Jesus came into the world because he was sent by the Father to destroy the works of the devil. And by destroying the works of the devil, he revealed the true nature of God and proclaimed the gospel. And in doing so, he claimed to be the truth, the life, and the way. But when we read the Gospels, we see that Jesus was opposed every step of the way. Because God has an enemy. And just as Jesus came to proclaim the gospel, God's enemy has an anti-gospel. And so again this morning, in the Acts of the Apostles, you heard this. When the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy and with violent abuse, contradicted what Paul said. The Jews, however, incited the women of prominence who were worshipers, and the leading men of the city stirred up a persecution against Paul and Barnabas and expelled them from their territory. God's enemy is smart. He uses you and I to do his work. The women of prominence and the leading men of the city were worshipers. And yet, they persecuted Paul, who was proclaiming the truth. And to persecute the truth is to persecute Christ, because he is the truth. Listen to what the Holy Father says about offenses against the truth. For the third time in as many weeks, Pope Francis has warned not to speak ill of others, and again mentioned the devil in another striking homily in the chapel of the Vatican Santa Marta residence. You don't hear much about the devil anymore. We don't talk about him. We don't hear much about hell anymore. But the devil and hell are real. And the Holy Father wants us to understand that he's most powerful when we deny his existence and his presence. Listen to what he says. Calumny, he said, is worse than sin. It is the direct expression of Satan. Calumny is gossip. It's worse than sin, and the Pope says it is the direct expression of Satan. When there's gossip being spoken, that is not the voice of the shepherd. That is the voice of the anti-shepherd. The Pope says we're all sinners, all of us. We all commit sins, but calumny is something else. It is, of course, a sin too, but it is something more. Calumny aims to destroy the work of God, and calumny comes from a very evil thing. It is born of hatred, and hate is the work of Satan. Calumny destroys the work of God in people, in their souls. Calumny uses lies to get ahead. Be in no doubt, the Pope said, where there is calumny, there is Satan himself. So I thought to myself, I'm going to go to the Catechism and see what the Catechism has to say about calumny. And there's a whole list of things. And when I read the list, I said, I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. Listen. False witnesses and perjury Statements which are contrary to the truth take on particular gravity. They destroy respect for the reputation of persons, forbids every attitude and word likely to cause them unjust injury. How often do you hear or do we participate in, did you hear what so-and-so did? Rash judgment assumes as true, without sufficient foundation, the fault of the neighbor. How often do we repeat things that we hear about other people? We don't even know who they are sometimes. Probably never even spoken to them. Know nothing about them, but we're passing on information as if it was true. We all know what we've been through as a nation this past week. And yet, someone posted some guy's face on national television because they thought he was a suspect. And here the poor guy was innocent and said, I was afraid to go outdoors. I thought somebody would shoot me. The second reading talked about the martyrs, which were persecuted for the sake of Christ. People on the receiving end of gossip suffer a different kind of a martyrdom. They don't die one death, they die 1,000. Because to participate in the destruction of someone's good reputation and name is a very serious and grave matter. And sometimes people don't recover from those things. We all know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of gossip. But yet, we find ourselves contributing to it sometimes, participating. Simply listening to it is participating in gossip. Detraction. Detraction discloses another's faults and failings to persons who did not know them, even if it's true. If we are passing on information about other people, we are guilty of the sin of detraction. Guilty of the sin of detraction. Think for a moment. When you turn your television set on today, what are we listening to most of the time? It's not news. It's not even anything informative. Most of the stuff on television today is trash. It's all gossip. It's all gossip. And it seeks to destroy the work of God in a person's soul, the Pope said. Be honest with me. Is there much that builds up the spirit in a person on television today? Yes or no? No. When I go to school and I'm talking to my friends, what do I talk about? When I'm at work with my coworkers, employees, what do I talk about? What do I participate in? What do I listen to? What do I contribute to? Calumny are remarks which are contrary to the truth. They harm the reputation of others, and they give occasion for false judgments concerning them. Detraction and calumny destroy the reputation and honor of one's neighbor. Everyone enjoys a natural right to the honor of his name and reputation and respect. Thus, detraction and calumny offend against the virtues of justice and charity. The very people who were persecuting Paul and Barnabas were worshipers. Here they were worshiping God, and God's enemy was using them to destroy the very work that God was trying to create in all of us, to build us up. And they were tearing down. You see how we get caught up in all that stuff? It's so easy. I told you, I went through this list and I said, oh, I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. As a confessor, I want to tell you that few people come to confession and confess the sin of calumny or gossip. Few people. And yet it is a very grave and serious sin, and depending on the destruction of the remarks, if we destroy a person's character and reputation, there's a sin that says, thou shalt not kill. We murder that person. That's a mortal sin. It's a mortal sin. We are called to be ambassadors of Christ. We are called to be agents of the truth, not to be carrying on and participating in calumny, in the destruction of the very work that Christ has come into the world to restore, the works of the devil. It is the slickest trick in the world when the devil can use Christian people whom God has chosen and set apart to proclaim the gospel and use those very people to undo the very thing that Christ died for. Offenses against the truth separate us from the love and the voice of God. It's true. No one can take us out of the Father's hand. No one. Except you and I. We can remove ourselves from the Father's hand through offenses against the truth.